Anyone who said aye. Anyway, done, sorted. And we are now on Waikomiti, which is on page 361. I know the guys have been waiting for a very long time. I don't know if we need to go through a huge discussion about this. We're happy to take it as read. Okay, so Councillor Cooper moved, Councillor Clone Cooper. Councillor Clone Cooper have moved and seconded. We'll see how that randomly falls. And you have a question, Councillor Clone?
In 3 days of my life with John Tamahiri on the Reserve Management Plan. So my question is, what is the status of the 2015 Reserve Management Plan, which, as I say, I'm declaring an interest. I sat on the committee with John Tamahiri plus an independent person. What is the status of that as compared with the Waikomiti Cemetery Master Plan, and what did the Unitary Plan do to the 15 Reserve Management Plan? That seemed to scale it right back.
So the 15 Reserve Management Plan remains in place as the management plan for Waikomiti Cemetery, and as you'll be aware, it identified a number of areas for potential expansion of burial areas. The impact of the Unitary Plan was to create significant ecological areas over large parts of the undeveloped parts of the cemetery. And by doing that, it makes the regulatory process for developing those areas for lawn burial very challenging. So that was the broad context which under which staff have and has been agreed to. We need to reassess what is now, given the change in the regulatory context, what is now feasible to develop for burial areas, which was the purpose of the feasibility study first to inform that, and then the master plan. So it's really it's assessing what is feasible and deliverable.
What ability do we have to investigate and overturn the Unitary Plan changes? Because I'm putting my hat on as Chair of Finance, and I know when we put through that 15 Reserve Management Plan, that actually gave us capacity for 30 years. Now, this is cutting it back in half. That's a hell of a lot of money we're going to have to, means we're having to front up earlier for 15 times, 400 burials a year. I mean, we're basically going to have to outlay capital, significant capital somewhere to buy another cemetery site. Is there any ability, or is there any zest or whatever for that sort of fight to try and overturn that? Because the ecological side of things is not being anti-ecological, but it is a cemetery, and that's what it was designated for. It wasn't meant to be a place to grow wildflowers, which happened to have, and I think they're South African wildflowers by and large. So they are nice, but the thing is that they're very expensive wildflowers. Well, I think they found one once. Anyway, I'm actually quite serious about this, but I'm happy to move it anyway. I just want that question, because huge capital outlay. We basically had change just like that overnight by virtue of the Unitary Plan imposition.
So I think there's two parts to an answer there. So the process of changing the SEA, not being an expert planner, but I understand that would be a plan change process. So that would be involve the normal plan change process, no end of ecological assessments. It's worth noting that during the Unitary Plan process, the proposed Unitary Plan had a much reduced SEA on that site. Submissions to the hearings commissioners and the SEA area was increased through that process. So any plan change would be a process of going back, re-challenging the decisions made during that hearings process. So that would be an interesting process to try and embark on, and I wouldn't like to guess how successful that might be. But I think importantly, the second thing to think about is that isn't the only constraint to developing the full areas that were identified in the reserve management plan. So certainly I think the feasibility study has highlighted that there are other considerations around, particularly around topography, access to some of these sites, the operational practicality of developing some of those sites. So even in the absence of an SEA over the area, I don't believe that the full area identified in the management plan would make sense to develop in an affordable, viable way. It just becomes too expensive because of the nature of the site.
I just followed it up, Madam Chair, just to say that what we're proposing today, we've got quite a short period of capacity left, and we need to do something. But your longer term question is, I think, that feasibility and affordability to do the full development is a real issue of cost as well, which would need to be balanced against those two options of either challenging the unitary plan and the SEA, or new acquisition would be the business case around that.
So, Madam Chair, I haven't thought of another recommendation, but I mean, you just need to read, once again, your local board, the Waitakere, or sorry, one of your local boards, the Rangers local board, again has come back saying we support the cemetery expansion as envisaged by the 15 Reserve Management Plan. And they're quite adamant on that for two reasons. And one is the capacity thing, and they're doing the right thing for Greater Auckland. And the other one is clearly they want the security of having the Parks Department look after the reserve for as long as possible, so it doesn't then fall back on the Waitakere Rangers local board to look after it once we exit it as a cemetery. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be mischievous. I'm actually trying to support them and trying to support us with it. I mean, is there a second recommendation we can put there that at least leaves it open for the staff to consider challenging or changing the unitary plan with a plan change? But if the staff think that's really not a good idea, then I'm happy to accept that as well. But
we could look at it without having specifically done that assessment. What we have learnt from both the feasibility study in terms of the ecological values that are inherently there, and certainly the feedback from the consultation from iwi, from stakeholder groups, and from the general public, there's certainly a lot of desire not to impact on those ecological values. So I think there would be. It would certainly, based on what we know, I think we can fairly safely conclude that going through an attempt to remove the SEA would be a very challenging process.
well, yet only 4 years ago there was really only one objector, and it was Robert Reid. Anyway, I rest my case.
Okay, Councillor Filipaina.
Just a small question, and tēnā korua, gentlemen. Look, the question is, with your stakeholders, the key stakeholders that you had in the report, did you reach out to the Pacific funeral directors? Because I know that in the West there's a high population of Pacific and Maori obviously with it. So I just wanted to specifically see if there was. Thank you.
So Lucy will be able to respond to that. I suspect we invited all funeral directors that are involved.
Yes, we did, but we didn't have much representation from the Pacifica community, and realised at the next stage we would more directly approach that particular group. Yes, it was a gap that became apparent.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, councillor. And Member Wilcox.
I've got a couple of questions. I see in the Hakawe Maori that there was one group that disagreed with the kaupapa. I'm just trying to work out how you're going to do that, because I see TCAM agreed. Ngāti Whātua were a no-show, but I remember Uncle Hugh and Uncle Doc doing this way back in the late 80s over Waikomete anyhow. And I'm just trying to ask where is the Urupa committee? Because in the late 80s and in the Waitakere Council days, they still had a role, and that role was given to them by Uncle Doc, that they had a kaitiaki role as well over that cemetery. Have we taken that away? And are they in the discussions that's going to keep occurring?
So the Urupa Committee is still very active, and their role continues in Waikomete. They have been involved in this project, in the process to date, and they're very interested in continuing to be involved as the master plan process continues. With regard to Te Akatai's response, that they're very much coming from a position of not supporting development of the significant ecological area because of the impacts on the green space and the ecological values, and as you'll read their quote, particularly in the context of setting a precedent for this to happen in other places. So their position is quite a principal one of saying it's an SEA and it shouldn't be developed.
Yeah, so have we thought of the alternative of returning to Maori methods of hanging people up in those trees then? I mean, I'm being serious on this one, because if it's an SEA, that's the correct kaupapa for them inside an urupa.
So look, there is a range of different burial methods available in Waikomete at the moment. Eco burials are one of those, alongside ashes and the various different cultural areas. What the challenge is that this is trying to respond to is the known demand we have for lawn burials. So it is really just the lawn burial demand that is driving the need to create more lawn burial areas. There's plenty of existing space for other burial types.
But I thought we did have space. This is where I'm coming from with this. Sorry, I am a little bit behind the times, obviously, but I thought we had the space even back in Waitakere days. I thought it was going to keep going till about 2040 or something, or 2050.
So that's very much what this project is about. At the moment, we've got about 3 years capacity left for lawn burials, and this is looking to see how we can extend that capacity as far as possible into the future.
So just to kind of round that out before I go to Councillor Cooper and picking up Councillor Clo's point, we are not completely shutting the door, however, on having another crack and going, people, you know, there is a good heart to keep Waikomete going in the long time as a cemetery. Should we wish to go back and revisit the unitary plan, that's not undoable.
I think, Madam Chair, there's a very strong demand from the community that lives and has an affiliation with Waikomete Cemetery, and I'm sure we'll be back before this committee or the council to seek further development of Waikomete in the future.
Okay, Councillor Cooper.
My question's a little bit along the lines that if, you know, in those discussions where the Māori who were consulted said, oh, let's not develop, was there any conversations about the current urupu there and how it may not be able to be extended because of that stance? Was there any kind of connection there that what they were saying on the one hand could severely affect the current availability of burial sites?
I'll defer to Lucy, who is actively in that conversation rather than...
The conversations that we did have with people within the Maori and Pacifica community were people that were very keen and looking to be buried themselves, but understood that later generations that would be perhaps looking at other forms of interment.
That sort of, for me, is not consistent with some issues around ashes where iwi have said no way, no ashes. So that to me speaks that there's still a huge desire to keep going with burials. So it's an interesting one. I mean, it's something we just, future councils over time are going to have to deal with, I guess. I mean, I do support Councillor Clow in that. I mean, it's all very well saying don't cut the trees, but where are you going to get the multi-million, tens of millions of dollars, and where is the land? That is the issue. There's nothing close by that doesn't cost, $50 million or more, or 70 or 80. Maybe Hobsonville Point. They want us to spend lots of money on.
So, Madam Chair, we will
Perhaps
be...
Bomb Point might be useful.
Madam Chair, we will be, coming back to you periodically with the supply and demand issue generally for interment and other forms of memorialisation across the region, but acknowledge it as a challenge, Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, and I think, again, the work that the team has done on this has been fantastic because it is bringing together all of those cultural elements, the acknowledgement that our changing communities, there's a move back to people wanting to be buried and that we need to make room for that. And at the same time, the team is out there looking for land to develop a new cemetery. Indeed. All requiring burying. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, team, and sorry to keep you waiting so long and not have a chance to do the presentation. Thank you. Councillors, I realise that it has been an exceedingly long day. We are just going to have a very brief... that's right. We're going to do... Councillor Filipaina moves 22, I second 22. That's just our reports. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And I'll declare the reconvened meeting closed. And thank everybody who hung in there. But I do just want to, we've got our staff who are here to do a very quick workshop with us on what we're doing as an organisation on our climate change initiatives and how we're planning to decarbonise our council family.